Intro: horror with roots in reality. Narrator: some horror films are forgotten the moment the credits roll, but others carve themselves into the audience's mind, lingering long after the lights go up. Hereditary, released in 2018, belongs to the latter. It wasn't just another scary movie. It was an experience that left theaters in silence, critics shaken, and viewers disturbed for weeks. The story of the Graham family, consumed by grief, plagued by apparitions, and stalked by a presence older than themselves, felt too intimate, too unsettling, as though the horror was not fiction, but memory. What made it different was its foundation. Beneath the carefully crafted story, director Ari Aster drew upon something far older and darker than modern horror tropes. He wove into his film real elements of occult rituals, secret societies, and centuries-old demonology. The chilling figure at the center of the film, King Paimon, was not a Hollywood invention, but a documented spirit from one of the most infamous books of sorcery. Layered into the narrative were echoes of real cases, families cursed by bloodlines, cult practices hidden in suburban America, and tragedies so bizarre they could not be dismissed as coincidence. Tonight, we step into the shadows behind the film. This is not just the story of a movie. It's the story of how real-world darkness inspired it, that made Hereditary feel the true horrors all too real. Chapter 1: The Cult Connection. At the very core of Hereditary lies a secret society, a cult whose unwavering devotion to King Paimon seals the fate of the Graham family. To many viewers, this may seem like nothing more than a disturbing invention of Hollywood, but the truth is far more unsettling. King Paimon is not a work of fiction. His name and mythology come directly from one of the most infamous occult texts in history. Occult, the Lesser Key of Solomon, a 17th century grimoire said to catalog the hierarchy of hell, its demons, their powers, and the precise methods of summoning them. In these pages, Paimon is described in vivid detail. He is one of the kings of hell, often depicted riding upon a dromedary, crowned and heralded by the sound of trumpets, with spirits and musicians surrounding him. Occultists believed he could grant knowledge of hidden things, reveal the mysteries of the earth, and offer wealth, fame, and influence over others. But such gifts came at a cost: loyalty, servitude, and in darker interpretations, blood sacrifice. Ari Aster borrowed directly from these centuries-old accounts when constructing his narrative. The cult in Hereditary, operating quietly, hidden in plain sight, reflects not only the lore of demonology, but also the very real fear of secret societies that have been rumored to exist throughout history. From the whispers of medieval Europe about witches' covens, to modern conspiracy theories about occult orders manipulating power from the shadows, the idea of hidden groups practicing ancient rituals has never fully disappeared. What makes this connection especially chilling is the continuity of belief. Even today, fringe occult circles still reference the same grimoires, including the Lesser Key of Solomon, with instructions that detail elaborate ceremonies for calling upon Paimon. While mainstream society dismisses such practices as superstition, the fact that these rituals persist at all gives weight to Aster's vision, suggesting that devotion to such entities can stretch across generations, binding families and communities in secrecy. In Hereditary, this lore is not just decoration for the story. It is the engine of terror itself, showing us that the most frightening monsters are not conjured by imagination, but drawn from belief systems preserved in whispers, manuscripts, and rituals that refuse to die. And the most terrifying thought of all? Somewhere, in silence and secrecy, there may still be those who bow to a crown that does not belong to this world. Chapter 2: Families Cursed by Blood. Narrator. The tragedy of the Graham family in Hereditary is not just a cinematic invention. It reflects a chilling, age-old belief that blood itself can carry a curse. Throughout history, tales have emerged of families who believed they were bound by forces beyond their control. Lineages plagued by unexplainable cycles of death, madness, and misfortune. These weren't isolated tragedies. They followed a pattern, as though something malignant was passed down like an inheritance. In folklore, such misfortunes were often explained not by chance, but by witchcraft or pacts made in secrecy. Some stories speak of desperate ancestors who struck bargains with dark forces for wealth, protection, or power. Bargains that demanded payment not just from them, but from every generation to follow. Others tell of families marked by jealousy and sorcery, where curses were whispered into charms, bound in rituals, and unleashed upon bloodlines that would suffer for centuries. Psychology offers another lens: hereditary trauma. Scientists argue that trauma can echo across generations, shaping behavior, silence, and fear. But to those who lived through it, the explanation often felt far darker. Families claimed to be stalked by shadowy figures that appeared during times of grief. Others described dreams of faceless entities or voices urging them toward ruin. Diaries uncovered in attics spoke of strange ceremonies. Heirlooms carried cryptic symbols. It was as if the very fabric of the family's history was poisoned. Even in modern times, these echoes remain. In the 1970s and 1980s, a series of unsettling reports surfaced in America. Small communities whispered about cults that preyed on vulnerable families, convincing them that salvation or prosperity could only come through ritual offerings. Rituals that often ended in despair, disappearance, or death. Many of these accounts were dismissed as hysteria, yet newspapers carried eerie fragments. Neighbors hearing chants in the night, strange markings on trees, or children speaking of hooded figures who visited when no one else was around. By weaving these chilling threads into Hereditary, Ari Aster transformed the fictional suffering of the Graham family into something disturbingly familiar. The idea of blood as a curse becomes more than a symbol. It is a haunting reflection of both psychology and the occult. A reminder that for some, fate is not written in stars or choices, but in bloodlines, where no generation can ever truly escape. Chapter 3: Real Cases of Possession and Cult Rituals. Narrator: the horror in Hereditary doesn't exist in isolation. In the 1980s, America was gripped by what became known as the Satanic Panic, a cultural wave of fear that secret cults were operating in suburban neighborhoods, carrying out rituals in basements and backwoods. Law enforcement records and courtroom testimonies describe stories of ritual abuse, animal sacrifices, and attempts to conjure demonic entities. Many of these cases remain controversial, with skeptics dismissing them as mass hysteria, fueled even beyond the US. Cases of alleged possession and ritual killings surfaced in Europe and Latin America, some tied directly to cult leaders who promised their followers wealth or protection in exchange for unholy devotion. These echoes of the occult find their reflection in Hereditary. The cult that ensnares the Graham family feels less like fiction and more like an unsettling mirror of stories whispered during the panic years. Whether fact, exaggeration, or a mix of both, these accounts blur the boundary between movie horror and real-world darkness, making the terror of Hereditary hit dangerously close to home. Outro: when fiction bleeds into truth. Narrator: so is Hereditary merely a work of fiction, or a reflection of something much darker lurking beneath the surface of our world? On the surface, the Graham family is a creation of Ari Aster's imagination, crafted to terrify audiences. But when we peel back the layers, we find that the foundations of their story, the secret cults, the blood sacrifices, the unholy devotion to ancient demons, are not inventions of Hollywood. They are drawn directly from centuries of occult lore and unsettling modern accounts of ritualistic practices. And that is why Hereditary feels so different from other horror films. It doesn't just scare you with sudden shadows or sharp screams. Its horror lingers because it is rooted in ideas that have haunted humanity for generations. Across dusty pages of grimoires, in hidden societies, and in criminal reports that many would rather forget, we find echoes of the same darkness. When the credits fade and the screen goes black, the questions remain. Could such a cult exist today, hidden in plain sight? Could rituals like these be unfolding in secrecy, in basements, in forests, or in forgotten corners of our cities? Maybe the true horror isn't what Aster showed us on screen. Maybe it's the chilling possibility that somewhere out there, right now, a family, much like the Grahams, could already be living this nightmare. And we may never know until it's too late.